Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, in conjunction with the GCLS virtual series, I want to welcome you to the January GCLS Writing Academy After Dark virtual event called Small Bites, Flash Fiction. The panel today is sponsored by Flashpoint Publications. Flashpoint Publications is now accepting submission from all authors with any novel-length stories within the rainbow spectrum. Please visit for more information at flashpointpublications.com/submissions, and we will add that to the chat. Again, thank you to Flashpoint Publications for sponsoring this panel. Now, to make this session as interactive as possible, please use the Q&A box during the entire session. Feel free to start asking questions now. You're also welcome and encouraged to chat, but sure to remember a couple of important things. First, remember to change the recipients option to everyone so that the chat can flow freely. And second, be sure to adhere to the GCLS Code of Conduct, which you can view in the chat section and on the GCLS website. So let's go ahead and get started. We do hope that you enjoy this event today. And now I will turn the session over to our moderator, Finnian Burnett.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Carlene. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to have you all here, and I'm really particularly excited to have this group of flash fiction authors, Olwen Wilson, Slawka Scarso, Virginia Black, and Renee Young. And not just because I'm a fan of all of your work, although I am, but also because everyone here has a unique and thrilling flash style. So I thought it was great to bring this group together. For the format of this panel, I'm going to introduce each author. They'll read a brief piece of flash, and then I'll introduce the next author and they'll read their flash. Afterward, I'll ask a couple of pre-planned questions, but then I'll intersperse any of my questions with any of the questions you, the audience, have. And please feel free to ask as many questions as you want. Bombard us with questions. Let us fly by with this. I know you're going to have a lot of questions for everyone. So first up, I'm going to start with Renee Young. Renee is a 2018 GCLS Writing Academy graduate. Speculative fiction is her favorite genre for both reading and writing. Renee has spent the bulk of the pandemic hunkered down in the Pacific Northwest, consuming vast amounts of fan fiction, binge watching animated TV shows, and writing much less than she'd like, as so many of us do. Renee, welcome, and I'm looking forward to hearing your story.
Hello, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I am going to read a short flash piece. It's called A 20th Century Life. Not like that. Lynn heard the words right before a cool hand covered hers. Like this, the voice murmured, warm breath tickling her ear. With guidance, Lynn rested the metal toy on the matte plastic street, and together they rolled it backwards into the empty slot in the long line of similar looking toys in the exhibit. Lynn frowned. The info vid showed oh stars, what was the word? The cow was flying. Her helper giggled, cars, not cows. If we were in the 22nd century section, you'd be right. Nothing flew in the 20th. The words were stated with confidence. Lynn turned, any disagreement fading as her gaze landed on the most beautiful girl she had seen in all her 16 years. Oh, Lynn said. A blush blazed up her neck, barreling to her cheeks. You know a lot. Yeah, the girl answered as she glanced away, brown skin tinting rose. My mom's a historian. That's really cool. The sounds of her classmates joking around the other exhibits faded while Lynn stared, brain frozen. I'm Gina, the girl said. Her smile was like the sun. This old-timey stuff is boring, Lynn's classmates shouted to her. We're leaving. Ignoring the beckoning gestures of her friends, Lynn frantically looked around the cavernous room, searching for any excuse to stay. A holosign caught her eye. She pointed towards the simulation room and asked, show me how these non-flying cats worked? Gina laughed as she entwined their fingers and pulled Lynn into motion. Cars, not cats.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And next up, I would like to introduce Olwen Wilson, who is a writer from Canada whose enthusiasm for finding joy and beauty in ordinary moments is contagious. She loves to be surrounded by loud laughter, unread books, cuddly cats, warm blankets, and birds singing outside her window. Her story, More Sludge Than Pink Popsicle Sticks, will be published in an upcoming Flash Fiction Festival anthology after receiving a runner-up contest placement. And you can find her online at www.olwenwilson.com, which we will put in the chat after your story. Thank you, Olwen.
Thank you. So I am going to read More Sludge Than Pink Popsicle Sticks. Before Miss Day's sleeves betrayed her secrets, she never let me go a day without fresh flowers. Sunflowers rose from my lip to welcome the children to their first day of school. Red roses meant Christmas break was approaching, but I felt my best when filled with the daffodils and pink tulips that brightened our classroom around Easter. Miss Day never refused a child's request to enhance her bouquets either. Jordan shoved wilted dandelions in with mauve chrysanthemums, while Ben held me still. Nicole's sticky snack time fingers rearranged the tall grasses she plucked from beyond the bordering fence. And each day, sweet Jenny gifted me at least one popsicle stick she painted our favorite color, pink. But that all changed when Miss Day stopped Sally from slipping me a small pale blue card she found in the garbage. One of those cards, always chucked before students arrived, with an inked heart and the letters R-O-B. Sally retaliated by threatening to smash me on the ground. Arms overextended to bring me back to the safety of her desk is how the children saw Miss Day's bruises. Sally retreated. No one was allowed to add anything to me for the rest of the day, or the next, since Anna's mom complained to the principal about her daughter painting purple, green, and yellow marks on her arms to match Miss Day's. Or on the days when the supply teacher step-stooled me to the high shelf, and definitely not on the day half the class was absent to attend a funeral. By the time the principal came to our class to introduce Mrs. Knight as our new teacher, I held more sludge than pink popsicle sticks.
Fantastic. Love the unexpected narrator in that story. All right, next up, I have Virginia Black. Virginia's work includes short stories with Sapphire Books as part of their Fandom to Fantasy series, Constant in the GCLS Writing Academy anthology, Writing Freedom, and Reclamation in the Bold Strokes book anthology, In Our Words, Queer Stories from Black, Indigenous, and People of Color Writers. She lives in the Pacific Northwest with her wife and daughter and is always hoping for rain.
The story is called Hooper's Island Sunset. You'll forgive a personal twitch here. Hold on just a second. This will keep me from distracting myself by looking at myself instead of the damn story. Linda Weller grabbed a wrap from a rack as she walked out the door, hissing when her cocktail spilled onto her hand. The air outside was still warm, but the temperature would drop quickly once the sun set. She walked across the tiny putting green, past the pool, and headed for the tiki hut that looked over the beach. For everyone in the neighborhood, this was the place to watch sunset. Today, there was only one occupant. Linda rolled her eyes. Carrie, Linda said, schooling her voice to politeness. Hi, Linda. Of course, it was the end of the world, so the only person here was the one she couldn't stand. As was the custom, they sipped their cocktails and didn't speak as the sun crawled toward the horizon. Sunsets here were always spectacular, but today was glorious. Linda was glad that the last sunset she'd ever see was such a memorable one, then winced at the irony. What time's it supposed to hit? Carrie said. Linda tried not to sound annoyed. 3:22 a.m. local time. As if Carrie didn't know that. Every news station on the planet had broadcast the exact time the asteroid would hit. Well, I'm taking extra sleeping pills tonight, Carrie said, then laughed. Linda realized that Carrie was brighter than she'd thought. While the rest of the world went mad staring into the face of its own demise, Carrie had, like Linda, decided to spend it watching one last day come to an end.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right. Next up, I have Slawka G. Scarso, who has published several books on wine and works as a copywriter and a translator. Her short fiction has appeared in Dyslexia, Ellipsis Zine, Entropy, Bending Genres, and Necessary Fiction, among others. She was also recently shortlisted by Fractured Lit and lives between Rome and Milan with her husband and her dog, Tessa. And we will post your information as well, website and Twitter, in the chat. I'd love to hear your story.
Hi everyone, how have you been? Thank you for having me. I read this, it's titled Italian Summer Drama with Open Windows and Robins announcing the break of day, 7 a.m. The tinkling of coffee cups and saucers, the pressured puffing of the cappuccino steam, 8 a.m. The rising chorus of cicadas as the sun pours through the pine trees. 11 a.m. Little splashes in an inflatable pool, and those giggles that have neighbors smile and think it's been too long since there was a child in the family. 12 p.m. Sizzling oil, and the theme of murder, she wrote, telling you it's noon. 2 p.m. Cicadas. 3 p.m. Cicadas. 4 p.m. Cicadas. 5 p.m. A ball bouncing against a wall, and a voice on the verge of breaking, solitarily counting each thud. 6 p.m. Cars rushing back from work. 8 p.m. The roaring of the crowds in the stadium over the television sets scattered everywhere. 9:29 p.m. A unison of cheers after a goal in the World Cup. 11 p.m. That voice yelling, "Stop it, or I'll kill you," into the night. 11:02 p.m. That other voice replying, "Aren't you always so dramatic?" And the laughter while you start to breathe again.
That was fantastic. And I want to say, before I move on to any of the questions I have a question from someone in the audience that wants to know if you would all share how many words are in your stories, and if those stories are published, if you have a link to them so they can read them. Renee, how many words were in your story?
253. It's not published, not yet, maybe.
And Olwen?
It's 284, and it'll be published in an anthology. I believe that should be coming out this year. So it's not online yet, but it'll be in a book.
Perfect. And Virginia?
248 words, self-posted on my website.
Perfect. And Slawka?
This is 300 words, and it's in Street Cake magazine. I'll post the link.
Okay, perfect. Fantastic. I think it's really amazing. I gave them a limit about 250 to 300 some words, how each of these authors encapsulated an entire world in such a short space of time. And that's kind of the essence of flash fiction. So before I go back to more audience questions, I just wanted to ask, and Renee, I'll start with you. What brought you to flash fiction?
I'm a little embarrassed to say that it definitely wasn't love at first sight for me with Flash. I think I poo-pooed it a little bit, at least initially when I was aware of it. And I don't know, we could talk about this, but I'm happy to report that I no longer think this way, but there was some question to me whether it was like real writing, whatever that means. And I was taking a lot of courses about 12 years ago when I was living in Boston at Grub Street, and a lot of them were novel focused or longer short story focused. But yet in the catalog, I kept seeing these flash fiction classes. And then finally, one of them was taught by an instructor I liked. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. I need to see what this is about. And not quite love, but really close to love. I'm just like, oh yeah, this is like challenging in a different way from writing longer works. It's like, I don't know. So to me, that was just like that introduction and the structure of a class for me was just like, wow, this is another sort of facet that another thing in my toolbox that I can like reach for. I don't always do Flash very much. We're going to talk about NYC Midnight later, hopefully. And but yeah, to me, that was it. It was just like, I took a class. I loved it because there's so many different ways that you can do Flash, and like having that word limit really forces your brain to do different things. I think that longer works you don't need to worry about with longer works. So.
Absolutely. And I know we're talking a lot about flash fiction, but Olwen, you write generally flash creative nonfiction. And I think that's really fascinating. And one question I have about that is when you're digging into family memories and real life issues, does that bring up a lot of intense feelings? And is that hard to do in such short pieces?
Yeah, it can definitely bring up intense feelings. And I remember a few years ago taking a workshop or kind of like having a talk with Lydia Yuknevich. I might be butchering their name at the moment, but I remember her saying, is there another way to tell it? Like, so, you do that first pass or that first draft of a story and get more creative and push yourself to kind of, figure out all the different ways that you could tell it and look for the nuance in it, which I was like, oh, a challenge. I'm here for it. And so that has helped me kind of get over those intense feelings, as well as, not to bypass them. Sometimes I do have to shelve some things like, I can't write that right now. We'll come back to that, or maybe not. And it's been interesting to see what else might kind of pop up when I'm either trying to like distract myself from some of those intense feelings or simply just feeling my way through them. I'm able to kind of find so many more stories, like offshoots, that I can kind of tackle.
Yeah, I've heard your work a couple of times now, and it's just really fascinating. And I love to hear about that process. And as long as we're talking about process, Slawka, I want to ask you, this is a question in the audience. It was also a question that I intend to ask. What is your process for writing something so short? Do you rush through and write the story first and then edit, or do you have a plan in mind when you start?
I think when I start a story, I usually have an idea of how long it will be. So sometimes I fight with stories and they end up being much longer than I thought, but usually I already have an idea of how long they will be. And I use prompts a lot, prompts and visual prompts a lot. So that helps, I must say, in my process, it helps. And then for longer projects like novellas in Flash, and I have a couple as work in progress, then I try to brainstorm ideas for new Flashes. That's more complicated, but especially with micros and, the kind of I usually write around 500 Flash pieces. And they're mostly, once I start in one session, I try to finish them. And then I have to, of course, there are so many drafts after that. But yeah, I think that's my usually my process.
That's a great way to do it. But, when speaking about knowing what your word count's going to be, Virginia, I'm going to direct this one to you because you are an absolute warrior of word count when you're writing novels. And I know you bust through so many words and you get your head down. How does that process differ when you turn from that just machine writing to writing something that might be only 300 words?
I think this question is fun just because you assume that I know how my brain works. The cool thing about Flash is I'm forced to reduce what I'm trying to accomplish to one core idea and sort of culling away anything that either does not have anything to do with that idea or is superfluous to just showing that snapshot. It's like it's just this tiny little piece, and if it's not setting the stage or providing color or context to that one core idea, then it gets cut. So it's the exact opposite of, oh, let's write 90,000 words in a month when I'm allowed adverbs and as many adverbs as I want. It's the diametric opposite of that. And that makes it in some ways almost easier to write because I can easily determine, well, that's fluff. It's got to go.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of parlays Renee into a question that Tammy Bird asked, and I'm going to send this over to you because I know you do the NYC Midnight Contest a lot, where they give you a word and a genre and an action and a word count. And so Tammy asked how much revision goes into getting something so short to meet the parameters of the word count. And in your case, how much revision goes to meeting the word count and those other things that they say have to be in it?
So the story I read, I actually wrote for the NYC Midnight. And the genre they gave me was romantic comedy, but I had to make it speculative in some way too, because that's just what I do. The thing that also with that contest though is there's a time limit, right? I think for that short, you only have 24 hours to write it. So I think for me, that's why I love that contest. And I put contest in air quotes because for me, it's just a contest with myself. But yeah, I think sometimes I just echo what Virginia said. It's like, I don't really know how my brain works. I think if I have an idea and I just write it, and then I start to look at what can I cut. Yeah, and then I do that contest with a group of a couple other writers from the Writing Academy for my year. So we like sort of support each other, and I'll be like, I have something, I'm at 260 words, please help me cut. Like, what can I do? And so we'll like send our stories around. And so, you know, usually it's like maybe 2 or 3 revisions. But one thing I love about Flash is that it's so short that we're not talking about, I have 90,000 words to revise. It's like, I have 260 words to revise. And so they're usually pretty short revisions, at least for me. And another thing I really appreciate about Flash is that I'm much more comfortable saying that this is good enough and I can leave it, right? Somehow I can. I have a much harder time doing that with longer works. I'm like, oh no, I can, let me tweak it some more, let me tweak it some more. And I like never finished doing that. But somehow with Flash, I'm just like, for me, this is as good as I'm going to get. I either have to give it to somebody else or I'm just done with it. So I don't know if I answered your question, but usually like 2 to 3 revisions because there's a time limit, right? So, yeah. Which I love. I love the restrictiveness of that competition because I'm just like, I can't stay in my head. I have to get it out and get someone else to look at it. And then I'm like, okay, I'm submitting it. I'm good. So.
That reminds me of Olwen's recent acceptance into the Flash Fiction Festival anthology. And that also, I think, had a time limit and a theme at least. Did you have, what was your revision process for that? And how was that experience for you?
Yeah, there was a time limit. That was, I think we went on the Saturday to the event and it was by like the next Saturday or Sunday. So you had about a week. Prompts were given on that Saturday and I didn't think I was going to do it. Like it was the first time I had attended, but I was like, but the entrance was included in the price and I'm all for like, I want all my money's worth. So I just worked on it and I had this idea. Lucky enough, one of my writing groups was meeting midweek and I submitted it to them just to get some input, which was, they were fantastic. And actually the winner of the contest was actually critiquing my story, gave me some great tips. So Allie McCrane had won first place and I ended up being the runner-up. So yeah, that was my revision process. And they gave me the feedback that, you know, I was convinced they thought I was a much better writer than I actually was. So I thought, no, I can't do this. I stayed up until like 4 a.m. in the morning because I was so excited to kind of, you know, just try it, just see what would come out of it. And when I submitted it, and then, you know, I think it was less than 2 weeks later, I heard back that it had been placed. And I was just like, again, are you sure you've got the right person? Like that was my only 3rd submission. So I was kind of, you know, it really like blew me away. I was in shock, still am. And again, so much pressure because, you know, 3rd submission and I get a placement and I'm just like, I can't write anymore. I'm done. Thank you very much. And then you invited me here and I'm like, oh shit, now I got to do this again. Okay. So yeah, my revision process, I'm still trying to figure it out because I still feel very new to, you know, this Flash world, but I'm having a whole lot of fun doing it. So that's what I'm focusing on.
That's one of the great things about Flash is the community is so welcoming and there's such a huge Flash community. And so I'm going to turn over to Slawka because someone actually asked in the chat, you had mentioned visual prompts and they want to know if you had an example of that and how those help you.
I can actually share a link if you want. but basically, so I run a group, and I run a group that was born in Geneva when I was living in Geneva, but it's now online because of the pandemic. So we have free meetings where everybody brings a prompt, and then you can either write based on yours, or you can write based on the others. You can mix and match however you feel. It's super flexible, and we have lots of fun. And then one day, there was one in particular. It was actually a Canadian artist called David Blackwood, and he does these prints that are fantastic. I mean, and he did something. Just a second, I'll share. It's called I think. Oh no, I don't want to waste anybody. I'll find it later. But anyway, it's this print about in Newfoundland, and they are pulling this house, and it was just such a beautiful image. And I wrote this flash then. It was rejected a few times, and then it landed in Ellipsis Design. So it had a wonderful home afterwards. But and I think it was, like this image was also very eerie, and it really spoke to me. And I think with images, the weirder the better. I also go to like how do you call it? Secondhand markets, flea markets, and look for objects there and see what speaks to me on that occasion. And we also do with a writing group. We used to do this story hunting a session where we would have like 15 minutes, a bit like Bargain Hunt on BBC. I don't know if you ever watched it, but you don't have to buy the things. You just need to find the ideas. But it's fun. It's fun.
That's wonderful, and definitely would love to see that link for sure. I think the reason the Flash and art go so well together is because Flash is alive, and it has so much movement in the way that art does. Virginia, so I'm going to pass this question to you from the chat. Do you think Flash fiction requires a full arc?
I think it depends on what you're trying to do with it. I've never attempted to tell a complete story in Flash. I've attempted that in short stories, and certainly the way I approach Flash can be helpful in short stories are the most problematic for me. Even with a precise word limit, it's difficult for me to at the onset determine what needs to be included and what's superfluous. And with Flash, I guess to answer the question, I don't think it's impossible to convey the whole arc. And there's certainly writers more talented than I that have succeeded and punched me in the gut with doing exactly that. I think for me, the reveal, right, that you think one thing is happening and then bam, something else is happening, or as demonstrated earlier, an unexpected narrator or an unexpected gotcha. I think that's an easier thing to attempt, but I'm not saying it's impossible. I have not successfully done it, but it can absolutely be done.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you this, Renee. What advice would you give someone who has never written a Flash before, and they're going to leave this panel today and they want to try it?
I think my first advice would be like, please try it. I think it's a lot of fun. If you have the means, I would say maybe a class might be really good. I happen to really like the structure of classes because, like, one of the classes that I took, we explored a lot of different things. We had different limits, like write a 50-word story, write a 3-word story. I think you could have an interesting discussion. Is 3 words, is that a story or is it a mood? And so, like, I have a really hard time sometimes thinking of things to write about. So for me, having someone else sort of give me the guardrails is really helpful for me. But there's a ton of online resources too. I think, like, if you don't want to pay for a course, so you don't have the means, it's totally understandable. There's a lot of online resources. I don't know them, but Finn has a lot of stuff on Twitter that they publish or post. So I would encourage you to follow Finn if you're not following Finn, because they do a lot of flash fiction stuff there that I bookmark, and maybe one day I'll go look at it again. So yeah, I think that is the main thing, to just try it, go look for some resources. If you can take a course, take it, if that sort of calls to you. And if you happen to have a few friends that you can maybe rope into the adventure and journey with you, I always find like having people supporting you and supporting each other, to me, that's one of the best things I've got from the Writing Academy, is the community that I have. And I write way more because of that community than without that community. So find a couple buddies and make it happen. And if you ever want somebody to read, feel free, DM me. I'll be, I got the story. Can you read it? I'll be like, yes, I can read your story. So yeah.
That's very generous. Speaking of community, Olwen, I know that you have a writing group, and I've met you at several workshops, so I know that we have this kind of same feeling of workshop. How necessary to your writing is that community, and what has that brought you, being in workshops and writing groups?
Yeah, the writing groups and the workshops have helped, because I said that I'm newer to Flash, expose me to things that, would have taken me a long time to maybe find on my own. They give me something to respond to. So sometimes I might have a hard time kind of thinking something out of the blue, and somebody will give a prompt, or they'll even, say something or something from their story. And again, I can kind of pull something out to go and explore and create with. And, everybody that I've met has been extremely encouraging. So having their voices in my head as I'm writing, or, when I thought you've given this, this feedback to a writer that you thought was not me, but kind of knowing that, no, they gave it to me for a reason. I'm going to go see what I can do with it is enough to kind of keep me going, keep me up really early in the morning, because I'm just like, I want to try this. This is so much fun. So yeah, it gives me life. It gives me life. I mean, at the same time, I have to be discerning with what groups I'm going in, because they can also suck all the life out of you if you're in the wrong place. Nothing wrong with the people, just not, the right fit. So it can take a little bit of trial and error to find out what I want, as well as what I can offer, so yeah.
It's like dating. Sometimes the first date you find your soulmate, and sometimes you have to go on 100 dates before you find one that fits.
Exactly.
Kind of along those lines, Virginia, but on the publishing angle, what advice would you give someone who has written Flash, but they've never submitted, or they've never had an acceptance? What advice would you give to someone that just really wants to get that first story?
Specifically for Flash, I would say there are so many, in my opinion, Flash fiction anthologies. And as far as publishing is concerned, persistence is key. Don't quit. If you're getting positive responses from your betas, from your friends who are looking at your work, and if you're taking the advice that you get for improvement and you're still not getting published, then it's a matter of persistence. It's not a matter of skill, right? If your friends are like, nice effort, well, then you need to work on your craft. But there are so many different, I was shocked to discover how many anthologies there are. And of course, right now, the only one that comes to mind is The Arcanist, or The Arcanist. I'm probably mispronouncing that. But there are a number of them out there. There are, I don't want to say a gazillion contests, because I think you and Renee know more about those than I do, but there are a number of contests and sort of passive wink competitions where you're mostly trying to get your friends to upvote what you're doing, but it's still a way of getting your work out there and fine tuning it. I hate to say just keep at it. But in lieu of actual publishers to refer you to, I would say just keep at it.
I think that's great advice. And Slawka, I want to ask you about this. So we were all kind of talking earlier about, and then Virginia just brought up that you think you have a great story, but you're not sure, or maybe it's not great and you're not sure what to do, and maybe it's been rejected once. How do you balance I know I've written a great story, but now it's been rejected and now I'm still not sure if it's great. How do you get the gumption to keep submitting?
So I read somewhere that they suggest that you should get 100 rejections per year to submit. So sometimes when I get a rejection, I see maybe I don't resubmit that particular story right away, but I will look around and to send at least 1 or 2 things that same day among the other stuff that's ready. And also one story that's been rejected maybe 12 times already, but I'm there. I will get it published at some point. So it's a tricky one. I don't know. Maybe it's too personal. That's the problem. But I think the only thing you have to do is really to keep submitting. And you know, I had very bad months, really bad months, and then very good weeks which were surreal. And then the bad thing is that you forget those weeks, the good times when you get the acceptances, you forget them the next day. And as soon as the rejection arrives, it's like, no, I'm really not good. You know, I'm terrible at writing. And then, and so I keep telling myself, I have to print out this and I have to, you know, make posters of this and write this down, but then I forget. Yeah, just keep submitting. And I personally like online magazines because they're available to everyone, and they're just there, and they have a very high readership, in time. So I do submit to those a lot.
Just keep trying is such fantastic advice. I had met an editor who told me that he accepted 1.4% of the submissions that he had received that year. So a lot of times if your story didn't make it, it's because they just did not have the space for it. And maybe it was a great story and it just didn't fit that year. So I'm going to go to some of the questions that we have in the chat because we have a lot. And first of all, I guess I'll put this out to anyone. So anyone feel free to answer this because I'm not sure. Are any of you also poets, and how does poetry and flash fiction go hand in hand?
So I'm not a poet, however, and I never thought that I understood poetry, but I'm finding that I am turning to it and wanting to explore it a bit more, because how it describes, and any poem describes things, places, feelings, emotions. It's so usually short, right? It's like quick. It's helping me think in a different way when it comes to writing flash fiction, because we have these constraints, right? Sometimes we have, whether it's, 500 word, 1,000 word, or something like 100 words, or like a few sentences. How can I say this clearly so it has an impact? So that's how I turned to poetry, and I'm just like slowly trying to like wade into it, but I don't call myself a poet and probably never will. So
I used to write lots of poetry like a few years ago, not as a teenager. I hate teenage poems. So I wrote my first poem at 27, I think. But I always felt they weren't real poems. Like they were just poems with very short lines. And I think they were my prose in the end. I don't know. I think I was cheating.
I would say that I avoid poetry like the plague, but I have often worn a songwriter cap. And if that's not poetry, then why do half of the emo bands exist? And I think when I look at it through that lens, it has the exact same goal of, here's the specific idea that I'm trying to convey, and here's the medium I'm trying to convey it through. I think that what frightens me about poetry is, much as I understand different types of song structure, I do not yet know enough about the different types of poetry to understand the rules and the framework, so that I am using all of the tools available within that framework to convey the idea that I want to convey. So there's my poser poetry response.
I have a question. I'll start with you on this one, Renee. Somebody wants to know, what's the shortest word count story you've written? But I'm going to amend that to say, what is the shortest word count you've written that you believe can be called a story?
I think we could have a good discussion on what is a story, right? I for one of the classes, I wrote a 50-word story, and I really liked it. Maybe it's not good, but to me, it doesn't really necessarily have maybe a beginning, middle, and an end, but it's like, I tried to capture this moment for this person that's like very uncomfortable, and let the reader do a lot of the heavy lifting for me, right? I think when you start to get word counts that low, you almost rely on that relationship. Like, I may be leading you, but I need you to take that jump from your own experiences and what that might mean to you. So short answer is, 50 words.
How about you, Virginia? Have you dipped into the 50-word story thing?
And I'm still a chicken on that one. Although I like the idea of using those limits within other. Apparently, Finn, when you ask me a question, I'm going to morph it to whatever I want to talk about.
Oh, that's fine. We're good with that.
I like taking that and applying it to, say, a novella. All right. You've been describing this character for 4 paragraphs. Knock it off. Cut it to 100 words. And so I think it's possible to have these certain targets that you can use in other formats. That's a fun tool. I have not successfully in my work written anything less than 250 words that I was happy about, that I was willing to share with anyone besides my drinking buddies. So I'm still happy in the 250 range. I think 50 would be really powerful. So I'll add that to the list of things to try this year.
Fantastic. And I will happily read that for you when you do. Slawka, I'm going to bat this question over to you because I know you've written a novella in Flash. Abby Crofton just wants to know, can you discuss what a novella in Flash is and how your process is for writing that?
So I have one which is a work in progress, and I'm trying to wrap it up because there's the deadline with the past Flash fiction and ad hoc fiction in 9 days. So we'll see how this goes. Basically, with novella in Flash, you have it's like a novella, so it's short, but it has chapters that are really flashes, so they are meant to stand alone. So if you read each one separately, you would enjoy it as a reader, even without knowing what happens before and after. And the other nice thing is that you can play with structure. It's like a puzzle, and then you can move around parts more than with a novel, I guess. So it's more flexible, and you can play with styles. Michael Loverday, he has this a group on Facebook where they share lots of resources on that, on novellas in Flash. And he also said that you can play with structure. I mean, you could mix and have maybe prose poetry in some parts and have more experimental works elsewhere. So I think it's nice, but you still need to have some sort of arc, something that puts everything together. And it's of course, different from just a collection of flashes.
It's a stunning form, really, very cool. I have a question in the chat. It's a good one. It says, do you think that a person can share a value piece of their culture or community through short pieces in a way that can actually do their story justice? Can shorter pieces teach important lessons or start the meaningful conversations? And Olwen, I'm going to go to you on that one.
Yeah, I think you can. I mean, I'm really trying to work on trusting my reader. And I forget who said it, you need to do your part. Like, I can put the words out there, you need to do your part. But I think that there are, especially with Flash, a great way to maybe introduce things. So introduce concepts, concerns, open people's eyes to realities that they were blind to or refused to look at. There's a way to infiltrate, through these, what seems like a sweet little story. And then it's like, wham, we're going to hit you over the head, or just leave you with something to think about. Because I think with Flash, because we can't tell, these big sweeping stories, even though you can say a lot and they can go over, generations, even in a story, there's a lot more that's not said. And hopefully if it's really well done, it's going to stick with you. Like I still have stories that I'm thinking about years later. When you think of even movies, books from your childhood, they left an impact. And I think you can do that with Flash. Of course, the writer has to decide what they're willing to kind of expose or share. But I think it goes back to that whole, like, what are the different ways that you can tell it, right? You don't have to just kind of share your pain. We can go beyond that and add to it. So yeah, I think it can be done. And I think it is being done all the time.
Yeah. As you said, and as Renee said too, that you're giving the reader something to start with, and then letting them, trusting your reader to take it further. I have a question in the chat, and I'll ask any of you if you want to take this. And they were wondering about hybrid forms of Flash and the different kinds of Flash styles that there are, and wanting to know if any of you write in that. Slawka, did you want to start with that one?
So I discovered hermit crabs this year. 2021, and I think they're so fun. Hermit crabs. It's this form where you actually steal the form from something else. So it could be a recipe, it could be a list or instructions to do something, and I think. I really like the constraint of the form. I think it helps me to get more ideas. It's like a prompt in a way, and I the constraint. I think it kind of, I don't know. It's it urges you, and it forces you to get that idea and to make it work within the story, and then you find the right idea for that kind of story, of course. I think those are very interesting. And then there's also the hybrid. I know that where you have hybrids actually in as characters in the story, that works too. So I think the nice thing about Flash is that you can have fun. So yeah. Wait,
can you explain hybrid? Because this is a fascinating. I just took some notes for myself because I've never heard of this. So like, what do you is it bad? Can I ask, like, what do you mean by hybrid in the story? I don't actually understand.
So basically, like, it can be that, like with hermit crabs, you, I don't know, like I wrote this story that was in the shape of the packaging, the wording on a package, and it was about love, but it was packaged love. So it was like ingredients and everything else, storage instructions and all these things. Or you can have, recipes. There was Jude Higgins. She was running a cupcake contest last year. And that was really fun because you had to write things in the shape of a cupcake recipe. But also, there are crosswords stories. I've never written anything like that, but they're very good. You just play around with the form, find anything that's around you, and just think if you can, try to work it out to turn it into a story. But I think it's fun. In my case, it helps me to write humor stuff, so which I find fun usually.
Flash is a great place for experimentation because you haven't invested a lot of time. And Virginia, I know that you write speculative as well as other types. Do you find that that's a genre you gravitate toward more in Flash because you can do that experimentation?
No, I tend to put speculative fiction in everything because that is the lens through which I see the world. The piece that I read, the inspiration for that piece, the prompt for that piece was just a sunset, and I had to throw an asteroid at it. Another piece I wrote was a Halloween piece, and all you see is a jack-o'-lantern, and I put two people in the middle of the apocalypse. If you give me a love story, I'm going to put it in a parallel universe, a spaceship, or their androids. I can't help it. Too much Star Trek as a youth. The spec fic comes automatically. The different forms that takes, however, that's where I like Flash, because I need to, or microfiction, or whatever label you want to put on these very reductive ways of telling a story. How can I convey? I know I keep coming back to this, but how can I get the precise idea across in the least number of words? Asteroid is easy. Yeah, asteroid has so many other things with it, I don't even have to explain. Here's when it hits. It's the last day on Earth. I'm done. Zombies were a little trickier. I guess it's a hard one for me to answer, because I don't have to pull the spec fic card. Everything I do is painted in spec fic.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there's no such thing as too much Star Trek. I think that we can all agree on that. Renee, before I come over to you, I want to address a question that's been in the chat for a while. And I think this would take too long to answer, but they're wanting to know what classes have you taken that are available to anyone. And I was suggesting that maybe I could get with you all during email and we can all brainstorm on what we think are some great classes, and then maybe GCLS would send it out to all the registered users here if they're interested in that. So that is to answer your question, Tammy. And then back to you, Renee. I'm going to bounce that speculative question right back at you and see what you think about writing in spec and how that goes with Flash as opposed to other forms of writing.
I mean, I love that Victoria already said this, because I feel like our overlap and sort of how we write is very similar. To me, it's like, I don't even think about it. If I could put it in a speculative setting, I just rather do that. I mean, like it was a romantic comedy prompt. And I'm like, yeah, and it was supposed to be like about parking a car, and you could write a really nice contemporary meet cute fiction about that. I'm like, why couldn't I set this in like the 23rd century and it's some sort of museum exhibit or something? I guess so. I did that. So I don't know. For me, it's just, it comes automatically. I was thinking about this question because you like it was in the prep questions, and I feel like I don't really have a lot of awareness quite yet around writing flash fiction. I think that's an area for me to grow, because I think somebody said it earlier, is like, you only have so many words and you're trying to trim. And I think you sort of, or at least for me, I'm still working on like, what do I really want this story to focus on? And like, how do I make all of those words sort of enforce that, whatever, is it setting that I care about? Is it this relationship? Is it the last sunset, but in the context of this is the last one ever, like there's an extra layer of grief there, right? Extra layer of whatever there. So what's like the important thing? So for me, I feel like I kind of still write flash fiction as very much like a little bit, I don't like this imagery, but like a shotgun. It's like this really wide thing. It's not super sophisticated yet for me, but now that I sort of think about it, it's like, how do I start narrowing, like what do I really want to convey with this piece? And how do I find those exact words to help me get that along? But a lot of times for me, the spec is just there. I'm one of those people, if you read like a lesbic contemporary romance description and I'd be like, blah, 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 and like in space or with werewolves, I'd be like, oh, that's like 10 times more readable to me. You just add that at the end, right? I'm like, yes, please. But so yeah, it's just automatic for me. So
That's fantastic. And I love that concept of the narrowing down what is the most important concept you want to get across here. That's a great way to look at Flash. Well, we only have a couple minutes left here, and I'm so glad that people had so many questions because I over prepped. I had like 30 questions for you all, and they were also interested in you. I didn't have to ask them all, but I am going to do the round table here of what is the best thing about being a flash fiction writer? And Olwen, I'll start with you.
Okay, no pressure. For me, I think it just lends itself well to the creative practice I already have. Like, you know, I try to be creative in everything. I am creative in everything. And I also visual journal. So I am, you know, making art out of things that are kind of floating around in my head, thoughts and feelings that I'm having, things that people have said to me, memories that I've had from before. And, you know, that practice kind of feeds into writing, which feeds into like all these different things. It's just, you know, just keeps giving. So the best part of it is that it helps me see the world in a different way. It helps me relate to people that I never thought, like, we are not going to be friends. And all of a sudden, like, well, this is kind of interesting about you. So with, you know, whether it's writing Flash, making art, any creative practice, it's helping me kind of just like have this space, this time, and see things, small little moments even, you know, or big world events in extremely different ways that I may not have been open to had I not gone down this route and this path. Simply being creative. Like, that's how I see it. It's all one big ball of creativity for me.
I love that. And I love the idea of connecting with people through what you've read of theirs. Slawka, how about you? What's your favorite part of it?
I think it's the fun and the variety, the fact that you can go, I mean, from writing a really, really sad story one day and then writing something that's humorous the next. And also the fact that in a 20-minute session you could have something complete, whereas I also write longer stuff, but they're never ending. And I think we already said this today. It takes ages to finish a novel. It takes me ages to finish a novel, and with Flash, it's so much. And there's the urgency of the story as well, which I find fascinating and exciting. So yeah, I guess these are the things.
Yeah, the urgency for sure. Virginia, how about you?
It's an inherently strict teacher. I can do whatever I want. I can come up with any idea. I can try and convey any possible thing I want, but I get this much room and that's all I get. And it forces me to evaluate the weight of every word. And that is a fantastic teacher. And it's not you've got to read every book on this shelf behind me. It's not you've got to sit through a whole class. It's sit your ass down and weigh every word and make sure that it's saying what you want it to say. How awesome is that?
Absolutely. And how about you, Renee?
I can't really add very much. I would just say, like, it can be a lot of fun and just allow you to experiment with things that maybe you don't typically write a certain way. It's like you said, it's low overhead, short word count, you know, it's like just play. I like that. When I can be in that frame of mind, I like that.
Nice. Well, I just want to thank all of you for being here. You are fascinating. I will have a panel with you anytime. And for all of the participants that we had here, there's so many of you. I love it. Thanks for your questions. And don't forget to connect with our fabulous authors on Twitter. And we will work on getting you that list of classes that you can all get involved in. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.